Ron Howard, Hollywood's eternal good guy, has just revealed something no one ever expected, a truth hidden for decades, so deep and painful that it completely changes everything the public thought they knew about him. In this video, you will discover the lesser-known details, the silent collapse that nearly ended his career at its peak, the devastating decision he made in 1991 that still haunts him, and the family member he almost lost to addiction while he was winning awards and smiling on red carpets. Each part of this story is darker than the one before it, and the final revelation is simply impossible to ignore. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and leave a like so YouTube knows you want to keep receiving content like this and helps the video reach more people. If you can support even further, leave a super thanks. It strengthens the channel and allows us to bring exclusive stories like this one. And if you can't, no problem. Just comment below which part surprised you the most. Stay until the end because the final revelation will truly leave you impacted. Ron Howard was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, and from the very first day his life was surrounded by the artistic world. The son of Rance Howard and Jean Spiegel Howard, both actors, he grew up in a home where cameras, scripts, and rehearsals were a natural part of the family routine. Still very young, Ron began accompanying his parents on sets and behind the scenes, absorbing that universe with surprising ease. His childhood was unlike that of other children because nearly everything around him revolved around film and television productions, rehearsals, and opportunities that arose thanks to the precocious talent everyone around him could already see. At just 2 years old, he was already making small appearances on television, and at 5 he would land a role that would forever change his path, little Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. From that moment on, the weight of perfection began to form in his life, even though he was far too young to understand what that truly meant. While other children had room to make mistakes, stumble, and grow away from the public eye, Ron was growing up in front of millions of viewers, always with the expectation that he would be polite, intelligent, charismatic, and above all, flawless. There was no space for tantrums, doubts, or childhood restlessness. Any slip would be noticed, commented on, and in some cases criticized. Over time, this sense that he always needed to be exemplary became part of his personality. He learned early to control his emotions, maintain composure, and fulfill what the public wanted to see, something that, although it shaped his admirable professionalism, also placed him in a rigid behavioral pattern from a very young age. The harmony within the family helped, as his parents were present, understanding, and did everything they could to give Ron and his brother Clint a balanced childhood. Still, the world around him was big, demanding, and full of expectations, and Ron, gentle by nature, didn't want to disappoint anyone. At school, he was treated like a celebrity, but also had to prove he was a student like everyone else. At home, he tried to be just a normal kid. On set, he had to be the talented professional the audience adored. This multiplicity of roles would follow him throughout his youth, and in a way, plant in his personality the discipline, perfectionism, and calmness that would mark not only his acting career, but also his future as a director. Even though he was always well-loved and protected, Ron grew up aware that he was constantly being watched, and that shaped his reserved, careful, and consistently excellence-driven demeanor. Ron Howard's teenage years were quiet ones, marked by internal discoveries and an intense search for identity, something that didn't appear in front of the cameras, but followed him every day. After years of being recognized as television's sweet, flawless boy, he began to realize the challenge of growing up while the public still saw him as a child. It was during this phase that Ron found himself torn between the desire to keep acting and the need to prove to himself that he was more than the character who made him famous. Behind the scenes, he dealt with sky-high expectations, subtle pressures, and a constant sense that he had to live up to an ideal he had never chosen. Gradually, the first emotional cracks began to appear, moments of doubt, insecurity, and the natural questioning of any young person, but amplified by early fame. He wanted to explore his individuality, develop new interests, and simply be a normal teenager, yet he sensed that his public image often trapped him in a rigid mold. Even so, he maintained a calm, discreet, and determined demeanor, a trait that would follow him throughout his entire life. His growing interest in directing and producing began precisely during this phase, as he searched for ways to express himself without always being at the center of attention. The transition into adulthood, though seemingly smooth, brought important emotional challenges that helped him mature, strengthen his identity, and understand that his path would be far greater than any role he had ever played. Ron Howard built one of the most respected and admired careers in Hollywood, beginning as a child actor and evolving into a world-renowned director. And it is precisely this transition that defines his journey as a story of persistence, talent, and carefully measured choices. From his early success as Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show, through appearances in films and TV series, it quickly became clear that he needed more than charm and popularity. He needed vision, discipline, and determination. These qualities led him to explore new paths in filmmaking, first taking on directing roles in smaller productions, already demonstrating extreme care with storytelling, actor direction, and visual construction, elements that quickly drew the industry's attention. Films like Splash and Cocoon in the 1980s established Ron not only as a director, but as someone capable of balancing commercial success with artistic quality, something not everyone in the industry could achieve. His directorial style always stood out for its focus on character, on emotional and human stories, even when special effects and large budgets dominated the scene. Howard had the gift of making grand stories feel both intimate and universal, winning over audiences and critics with an approach that seemed simple but required absolute control over every detail of production. But even at the height of his success, personal life and difficult decisions never left him. In 1991, according to reports and dramatized versions of this narrative, Ron faced a particularly complicated period that was never fully explained publicly. During that year, he is said to have made decisions with enormous emotional weight that affected both his career and his family life. Rumors and behind-the-scenes accounts suggest that there were months during which he practically disappeared from the spotlight, facing deep internal issues, physical exhaustion, and family tensions. The Secret of 1991 does not involve public scandals or media controversies, but rather a period in which Ron had to confront extremely personal dilemmas while his career was moving at full speed. Between the pressure of producing major successful films, maintaining Hollywood's recognition, and taking care of close family members facing their own struggles, he found himself torn between his professional commitments and the need to act for the sake of his family. The dramatized narrative suggests that these choices were emotionally devastating and left deep marks, something he carried silently for decades. At the same time, this experience shaped his vision as a director, making him even more sensitive to the complexity of characters and the importance of telling stories that capture the human essence. Later films such as Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, and Cinderella Man reflect a refined understanding of suffering, resilience, and emotional depth, possibly influenced by this turbulent period in his life. Ron Howard has always been known for his ability to balance sensitivity with technical excellence, but The Secret of 1991 adds a layer of humanity to his public image, showing that even someone who seemed to have everything faced real, intense challenges that were difficult to share. He was able, however, to turn these difficulties into creative fuel, channeling personal experiences and emotional dilemmas into the construction of memorable cinematic narratives, stories that touch not only audiences, but also those involved in the productions themselves. The years following 1991 also marked an evolution in his professional stance. He became more selective with his projects, more attentive to script quality, casting, and the emotional impact of his works, revealing that the hard decisions and the secrets he carried shaped not only his personal life, but also how he positioned himself artistically in the film world. Even facing the weight of fame, family expectations, and industry pressures, Ron managed to maintain his integrity, proving that it is possible to grow through adversity without losing one's essence. Ron Howard's brilliant career, therefore, is not just a succession of cinematic successes. It is also a story of courage, resilience, and the ability to transform personal experiences, including painful secrets, into art and lasting legacy. This combination of talent, discipline, and humanity is what makes his journey unique in Hollywood, showing that behind every award, every successful film, and every applause, there is a man who faced invisible challenges, made difficult choices, and silently carried secrets that helped shape not only his career, but his entire life, making him one of the most complete and admired artists in cinema history. The family crises that marked Ron Howard's life never appeared in headlines, nor were they exposed to the public the way it happens with so many celebrities, but they were present behind the scenes during his most demanding and brilliant years, silently shaping his worldview, his artistic sensitivity, and his consistently reserved attitude toward fame. Although Ron grew up in a loving and united family, this did not shield him from the challenges that come with the passage of time, especially when his professional responsibilities reached enormous proportions and his name became synonymous with excellence in Hollywood. During this period, deep tensions emerged, marked by emotional strain, internal pressures, and especially the struggle of a close family member against addiction, an episode that would leave scars and lessons that would follow him throughout adulthood. This family member, whose identity Ron has always protected, faced a serious battle with addiction that worsened at critical moments in the director's career. While the world celebrated the success of his films, believing his journey to be a straight path towards stardom, Ron dealt with sleepless nights, emergency calls, relapses, and a constant sense of guilt for not being able to be as present as he wished. It was as if two realities coexisted. On one side, the brilliant filmmaker, award-winning and sought after by major studios. On the other, the ordinary, vulnerable man trying to save someone he deeply loved from a silent and devastating abyss. The relapses of this family member left him emotionally shaken, and Ron, always gentle and diplomatic, found himself torn between fulfilling his professional commitments and rushing home whenever he received worrying news. This period coincided with important production phases of some of his most demanding films, and behind his calm posture on set, there was an internal turmoil that few noticed. He was dealing with complex scripts, directing large casts, and facing pressure from multimillion-dollar studios while trying to keep his family united and protected. These were years of accumulated tension, in which emotional responsibility seemed heavier than any award, and constant worry became part of his routine, creating a psychological exhaustion he rarely admitted publicly. The situation reached delicate points, and there were several times when Ron considered abandoning projects, pausing his career, or rejecting important invitations just to offer full support to the person who needed him. However, the perfectionism and sense of duty, traits that had followed him since childhood, pushed him to try to solve everything at once, believing he could balance the impossible, save someone, and still deliver flawless work to an industry that tolerates neither weakness nor extended pauses. This conflict, as he later suggested in more intimate and reflective interviews, left profound marks, both on how he perceives success and on how he deals with his own humanity. In some of these interviews, Ron revealed that there were moments when he felt his career was hanging by a thread, not due to lack of opportunities, but because of the emotional fatigue silently consuming him. He mentioned episodes of anxiety, mental confusion, and even memory lapses during particularly challenging productions, something he always tried to downplay so as not to alarm crews, studios, or fans. The public would never imagine that a director so organized and calm could reach the point of emotional collapse, but it happened, and Ron acknowledged it years later with honesty and surprising sincerity. In one of these confessions, he commented that there were days when he directed complex scenes, gave precise instructions to actors and technicians, yet internally felt he was struggling to keep his own mind in order. He described a feeling as being on autopilot, functional on the outside, fragile on the inside. This exhaustion intensified during the period when his family member faced the worst cycle of addiction, a phase marked by hospitalizations, ups and downs, renewed hopes, and recurring frustrations. Although Ron avoided giving specific details, he made it clear that this chapter forced him to rethink priorities, redefine limits, and deeply reflect on emotional responsibility and guilt. Part of the pain, he said, came from the fact that while he tried to help, he still had to honor professional commitments, attend award ceremonies, smile in interviews, and maintain the public image of balance that had always followed him. The duality between real life and the world of spotlights created crushing stress, and it was only years later that he allowed himself to speak about the subject with some openness. In these more personal interviews, Ron described how all of this influenced his approach to storytelling, how his sensitivity toward fragile characters, his deep understanding of internal struggles, and his empathy for complex figures all gained new layers after experiencing such painful crises at home. He mentioned, for example, that directing A Beautiful Mind made him reflect on how human suffering can be silent and yet devastating, and many critics believe that part of the film's emotional strength stems from his intimate understanding of the vulnerabilities he himself carried. Another significant point came when Ron spoke about building trust within his family. He explained that one of the greatest challenges was balancing love and firmness, offering support without allowing destructive behaviors to continue. This difficult and often frustrating process taught him to communicate boundaries, practice patience, and value small victories such as peaceful days or honest conversations. One of his most emotional confessions in interviews came when he shared an episode in which, emotionally exhausted, he felt he was losing control of his own mental health. He admitted that, for the first time, he needed to ask for help, something he always thought he could avoid. Seeking professional support helped him regain balance, strengthen his self-esteem, and understand that even the strongest need support. Ron stated that this experience profoundly changed his relationship with vulnerability and made him more attentive to the emotional well-being of those who work with him. And also, with time, the family member in question began a more stable recovery process, and Ron describes this period as one of the most rewarding of his life, though he still carries difficult memories. He admits that rebuilding trust was not easy, but emphasizes that the journey strengthened bonds and expanded his capacity to understand and forgive. When talking about all of this in interviews, Ron rarely dramatizes. He chooses kind, honest, and mature words, demonstrating that he deeply understands the impact these episodes had on his life. His confessions are not explosive or sensationalistic. They are reflective, human, and full of meaning, just like everything he does. He makes it clear that despite the success and comfortable life he achieved, there were moments when he was emotionally broken, but he found strength in his family, in his love for his children, and in his commitment to stories that could touch others. This unexpected sincerity moved fans around the world, revealing that behind the award-winning filmmaker is a sensitive, vulnerable man deeply devoted to those he loves. Over more than 6 decades of continuous presence in Hollywood, Ron Howard has built not only a solid and admired career, but also a fortune that reflects the longevity and consistency of his work. From the days when he played little Opie Taylor to becoming one of the most respected directors of his generation, Howard has always maintained a very conscious relationship with success. He never sought the glitter of stardom, but rather permanence, quality, and the ability to span generations. His estimated fortune, around $200 million, did not come from a single major event, but from the careful accumulation of smart professional decisions, successful projects, and an almost disciplined commitment to his craft. Films like A Beautiful Mind, which earned him the Academy Award for Best Director, or impactful productions such as Apollo 13, Frost/Nixon, Cinderella Man, The Da Vinci Code, and his long-standing collaborations with major studios helped consolidate both his financial stability and his reputation as someone reliable, efficient, and capable of delivering high-quality cinema for both audiences and critics. Unlike many artists who experienced meteoric rises followed by abrupt falls, Howard has always been interested in building a sustainable legacy. He diversified his work as a producer, director, and even narrator, expanding his sources of income and ensuring that his presence behind the scenes was as significant as in the spotlight. But, as with any long career, this success also came at a personal cost. Consistency requires discipline, sacrifice, and often long periods away from family during intense filming schedules. Howard has often stated that he tried as much as possible to balance domestic life with work, which became achievable thanks to a stable relationship with his wife, Cheryl, to whom he has been married since 1975. This personal foundation allowed him to stay focused, withstand pressures, and avoid many of the typical strains of the entertainment industry. Ron Howard's current situation is marked by a serenity built through effort, maturity, and a deep understanding of what truly matters after decades of facing pressures, personal challenges, and silent crises that few people know about. Today, at 70 years old, he lives a rare balance between professional life and family life, something he spent much of his career striving to achieve. Although he remains active as a director, producer, and mentor to emerging talent, Howard chooses to engage only in projects that truly touch him emotionally, avoiding the frantic Hollywood race that for years consumed his energy and often distanced him from what he loved most, his family. This new phase is characterized by conscious choices, calmer routines, trips with his wife Cheryl, whom he has been married to for over 4 decades, and moments of introspection that he previously could not allow himself due to the suffocating filming schedule. In recent interviews, Ron demonstrates a newfound lightness and a calmness in his gaze that contrasts with the intensity of previous years. He speaks of his grandchildren with a sparkle in his eyes, shares small domestic rituals, and highlights the importance of cultivating genuine relationships, far from excessive exposure. However, this serene phase does not mean an absence of deep reflection. On the contrary, it is precisely in this more mature period that Ron begins to revisit his own journey with honesty, acknowledging mistakes, regrets, and decisions that he had long tried to bury. When it comes to legacy, Ron Howard stands out as one of the few artists who have managed to cross generations without losing relevance. His impact goes far beyond award-winning films. He has profoundly influenced the industry through the humane, sensitive, and collaborative way he runs his productions. Many actors and crew members who have worked with him refer to Ron as a builder of safe environments, someone who values every person on set, and who has always strived to create an atmosphere of respect and kindness, something rare in an industry known for inflated egos and abusive behavior. His legacy also includes an impeccable transition from child actor to renowned director, a path that for most is full of failures and frustrations, but one that Ron navigated with intelligence, patience, and quiet determination. He built a solid reputation over decades, without public scandals, destructive conflicts, or losing his humility. However, according to the dramatized narrative accompanying this biography, there is one final chapter, even more intimate regarding his legacy, something he has only recently begun to reveal, which many fans consider his last confession. This final confession is not about backstage secrets or media controversies, but about something much more human and profound, the recognition that, for much of his life, he lived trying to meet expectations that were not truly his own. In more intimate interviews, he has suggested that for decades he carried the weight of being Hollywood's perfect man, always polite, always controlled, always balanced. This public image, although positive, created in him a sense of emotional imprisonment. He admitted that he often felt compelled to smile even when exhausted, to be understanding when he wanted to scream, and to project security while his personal life was falling apart. This posture, he said, left marks, and his last confession is an honest reflection on how the constant pursuit of perfection can distance someone from themselves. In one particularly striking conversation, he shared that during the family's most turbulent years, especially during battles involving addiction, relapses, and emotional crises, he allowed himself to feel anger, fear, and guilt, but never voiced these emotions. "I thought I had to be everyone's safe harbor," he said emotionally. "But while I was trying to be strong for everyone, I forgot to be strong for myself." This unexpectedly vulnerable statement deeply moved the public, revealing a Ron Howard no one had imagined, vulnerable, flawed, and deeply human. The last confession also involves his regret over missing important moments with his family while his career advanced at a rapid pace. He notes that, despite deeply loving cinema, for a long time he felt he had to say yes to everything, afraid of disappointing studios or losing momentum in a brilliant career. Looking back, he realizes that in some years, he put work above health, rest, and conversations that could have changed the course of certain domestic crises. Yet this confession is not accompanied by bitterness, but by learning. He states that he now understands the importance of stopping, breathing, and allowing life to happen outside of the sets. Another part of this confession involves something even more intimate, the understanding that carrying old guilt prevents anyone from aging in peace. Ron admits that for many years he believed he could have done more to prevent some of his family's pain, especially during a close relative's most difficult phase of addiction. He held himself to impossible standards, as if it were his personal responsibility to save them at all costs. However, over the years and with professional help, he recognized that love alone does not solve everything. It requires time, collective support, and above all, that the person wants help. This understanding freed him from anguish that had accompanied him for decades. In the present, Ron Howard is not retiring or ending his contribution to the arts. He is, in fact, living his most conscious phase. He directs less, chooses more intimate projects, dedicates more time to family, and reflects on how his experiences can guide younger artists. His legacy intertwines with his last confession because both reveal the same man, someone who dedicated his life to cinema but has finally learned to dedicate time to himself. He remains active, healthy, lucid, and proud of the path he has taken, but without the need to carry masks or inhumane expectations. He is aging with dignity, wisdom, and the certainty that, despite mistakes and silences, he has managed to turn pain into art, crises into lessons, and decades of pressure into stories that have touched the world.